WVHU.com. Thank you so much for tuning in on a Monday, April 17, 2023, 48 right now at Ironton. I want to welcome back to the program U.S. Congressman Brad Wenstrup, Republican from Ohio. Good morning, sir.
Good morning. How you doing, Tom?
I'm doing great, So let's first talk about this leaker that from the Massachusetts National Guard. How did he have access to the intel, and how was he able to leak that the way he did, and what are the ramifications of all that?
Well, the ramifications should be very severe, obviously, or maybe not so obvious to some, but it's obvious to me. You know, this is a 21-year-old Massachusetts Air Guard. His job is a cyber transport systems journeyman. What does he do? He installs and configures and repairs cyber things. I mean, he is a Airman First Class, which is enlisted 3, E3 it's called, and that's pretty low rank to have top secret and no foreign type of clearance. It's bewildering to me. You know, as a colonel in the Army Reserve, I was always secret clearance. And it just amazes me he has this. And I'm just curious, when he gathered all this, was he activated? Remember, he's a guardsman. He's not active duty. Had he been activated, or was he going through his 2 weeks of guard duty or something along that, or even just, you know, his weekend duty? You know, how did he have access to something like this? It was just in training. It should be simulation anyway. It shouldn't be type of thing where you're getting access to this level of material. So there's more questions than answers, Tom. You know, the motive is even more interesting. Was he acting alone? Was there more than one? Was it just part of this online game and chat room with people that played these games, or is it bigger than that? And then the other question is, why was some of it altered? In other words, we're being reported, they're real documents, but they were altered. And what's the motive of that? Was he just the whole thing? Was he just showing off to his group? But if you're altering it, to what context? Why would you put misinformation? Was it to, you know, make the United States feel like we're wasting our money in Ukraine, or motivating the Russians and to increase their morale or decrease Ukrainian morale? Because that's the way that things were changed. So the other thing concerning, too, is it reported that the FBI went to his home after the media released all this. But, you know, regardless, it's treason. It's upsetting. It can lead to a loss of American lives and those of our allies, and it's a major breach.
What are some of the specifics about what he altered? I mean, how did he change things?
So from what I understand so far, and I haven't had a classified briefing on this, from what I understand is it made it look as though Ukrainians had greater losses than they did and Russians had fewer losses than they did, which, of course, could be demoralizing to the Ukrainians, or also make Americans say, why are we spending this money when, you know, things are going terribly? And also maybe to boost the morale of the Russians. I don't know. It's bizarre, and those are the things we need answers to.
So what are the true numbers, and why do we not know them, no matter who they benefit?
Well, we do have pretty good numbers ourselves, and that's why it's recognized that these numbers weren't correct, and they didn't coincide what was in the actual documents. So they were changed. The question is why. You know, but there was so much information, Tom, in this. It talks about Ukraine's upcoming offensive. Analysts are reviewing all of this now to see what damage was done, but it was information containing anti-aircraft numbers, ammunition, fuel, other systems. So it gives the enemy a good amount of information to know what the Ukrainians are actually having. And that's just one situation, because the leaks also included things from the Middle East and from China itself.
So as a member of the House Intelligence Committee, is there going to be an investigation on this?
Oh, absolutely, without a doubt. And Mike Turner, the chair from Ohio, has also stated that. And we are going to get a classified brief as the entire members of Congress tomorrow.
As far as some of the other things that were divulged things that could hurt our relationships with allies, actually.
Oh, how can we be trusted? It's like you can't keep track of these things, and this stuff gets out. So why do we want to participate with you if we're concerned about things getting out that may involve them? And so it's a grave concern, obviously, and we've got to do some tremendous rebuilding after this. But you keep hearing these things. You go from Snowden to this, and there's been a few breaches in between. And it's always a possibility. You always have concerns about this. But, here's a 21-year-old guardsman that, in my mind, should never have had access to this type of material. And if so, why did he? I really want to know that answer.
I guess also the fact that we learned that there are U.S. troops in Ukraine. Is that right? And NATO troops on the ground there?
Well, we'll see what's actually in all of this, what it says, because I have not seen that to answer that question. But I would imagine, that we're assisting where we can. I think most of it's extraneous outside the country.
I mean, for us to have troops on the ground, doesn't there need to be a declaration of war by Congress?
Well, typically that would be, but we've seen those types of things violated over the years where we enter into war more clandestinely, and so I can't answer that at this point of who's there or what's there.
Well, so let's look back at your select subcommittee investigation. What's coming up next on that, and what do you make of Biden signing the resolution that the House and Senate passed on ending the COVID emergency?
Yeah, well, I think that was pretty impressive. That just shows that America has had enough. Let's start with the ending of the emergency, and then I'll go into the select committee. But it was a bipartisan effort, and it just shows Americans across the political spectrum are ready to move on from the pandemic. And for Biden, he did sign it. I'm glad he did. He signed it April 10th, and we're done with the COVID excuses, and it's time to move on. And, he's used that excuse for excessive spending and divisive tactics for sure. He's, driven up spending. And, we did some bipartisan bills during the actual emergency early on, but they just went further with partisan spending after that, and that's led to our inflation. So we are going to work on the select subcommittee, too, by the way, on a bipartisan basis to follow the facts, conduct a fair investigation, deliver the truth to the American people about what went right, what went wrong during the COVID-19 emergency. So it's a good parlay from that story to what we have coming up. And on the 18th, we will hold our second hearing on COVID-19 origins and to examine China's role during all this and explore all the available intelligence. It's another interesting thing is that in a bipartisan fashion, unanimously, I believe, and Biden signed it, that the intelligence communities need to declassify all their information that they have concerning origins of COVID. And so that'll be very helpful to the American people and certainly to us. I sit on intelligence committee. There's a lot of stuff I know, haven't been able to talk about. So hopefully we'll get some of these things declassified and let the American people know. And, we've had expert witnesses come in. There's new evidence that COVID-19 likely originated from a lab leak in Wuhan. It's been reported that the CDC director in China has said there's no evidence that it occurred in nature. But it is interesting. I received on Friday an email letter from the Chinese embassy encouraging the committee to cancel our hearings, and that they don't think we should go ahead with this. And I'm curious as to why the Chinese want to silence the truth about COVID-19 origins, right? Mm-hmm. So I intend to respond to the letter and would welcome any input they have that might help us in this process. But they don't feel that we should go ahead with this. The other thing we have coming up, Tom, is on the 26th. We're going to have a hearing with the American Federation of Teachers President Randy Weingarten, and we'll discuss their role in keeping schools closed longer than necessary. There appears to be some evidence that they edited the CDC guidelines for the school closures. I'm not sure why a teachers union should be partaking necessarily in a medical type of decision for the CDC. But that's the case that we are seeing, and we want to get to the bottom of that as well.
To keep their documents on these trials disclosed, or they did not want to disclose them for like 75 years, but they have been disclosed. And the information as people go through that is just unbelievable. The things that were known about the Pfizer mRNA jab and the problems that they had in testing. Is there going to be an investigation into all that and the tie-in with the FDA and the things that they knew and allowed to go on? Because there's been a lot of people suffering from these shots and adverse reactions and so forth.
Yeah, so we're going to be looking into our adverse reaction data system, how accurate it is, how much information is getting to doctors so that they can consult with their patients. But keep in mind, so much of this was done without a doctor being involved. Just look at the mandates, Tom. You have the President of the United States with no medical background saying you need to get this shot or you're fired from your job. Well, Americans don't do well with because I told you so. They want to be educated on things. And this was clearly missing. And I've said early on with the whole process that America needed to hear from the doctors that were treating COVID patients. I do believe mRNA technology has saved hundreds of thousands of lives through this process, and I believe it has a bright future. But we have to be cautious about what we are doing. Keep in mind, this was first put out for emergency use only. That's what it was used for. And we knew early on that people that got vaccinated still got COVID, but we saw that they were less likely to be hospitalized, less likely to die. So it was, for an emergency use, it was appropriate in my mind for those that have the vulnerabilities, the comorbidities that were leading to death. And we know that, millions of people across the globe died from this. So that made sense. But when you start talking about giving this vaccine to children and to teenagers that aren't at risk, and the data was showing that, that's a concern. And I did notice that it was really not pharma necessarily that was saying you need to get these vaccines. It was more our government saying it. But now the World Health Organization finally has come out and recommended that kids and teenagers, unless they have some medical situation that puts them at risk, they do not need to get vaccinated and should not get vaccinated. Well, this is something we felt all along. So why has our government played a part in this, in pushing these vaccines on people that didn't necessarily need it? And again, you saw it taking place without a doctor being involved. Just look at any ad for any other medication. There's always the disclaimers. Talk to your doctor about this. Talk to your doctor about that. Listing all the side effects. Well, we didn't know all the long-term side effects. And FDA approval seemed to be very rapid once the government wanted to put mandates on people. This all needs to be explained. And, to put a mandate on people that aren't at risk was extremely dangerous. We got to get the government out of healthcare and make things between the doctor and the patient and let the decisions be made on actual science, real data, and what we know. So we'll be looking into the FDA and their approval and all of these things that have been just a scourge across America, and the trust in our government when it comes to public health is way down.
Another mass shooting in Louisville over the weekend. The tragedy of people getting injured, people getting killed, the tragedy of a young person in many cases, having this mental illness, thinking that somehow killing 9-year-old children is going to be the best thing to do. It's hard for rational people to understand all that. But it's a conversation that I think needs to be had. But instead, it seems like Republicans, people who are pro-Second Amendment, are always put on the defensive when these things happen, because the first thing that the Biden administration, the media, Democrats want to talk about is gun control.
Yeah, I couldn't agree with you more, and I have spoken loud and clear on the floor when the last time we had debates on gun control, which is all that they ever say. And until you look at the events in someone's life that leads to the thoughts and feelings that this is okay, we're never going to get to the bottom of this or make any change. And we're doing society injustice if we only look at that. Look, I was shot at the baseball field, right? There's people I don't want to have guns. I get that. But that is not the underlying problem in my mind that we've faced today. And we need to face reality about where our society has gone. In the 50s, kids brought guns to school, put them in their locker, and went to target practice afterwards. But we are seeing from the Democrat side that there's just this culture of death, whether it's abortion, physician-assisted suicide. It's this negativity that comes from things like critical race theory, where, you know, if you're white, you're an oppressor, and if you're any other color, you're a victim, you know. But how about looking at faithlessness? Maybe there's a lack of faith within American families today. Maybe there's instability because there's only one parent, or sometimes maybe even no parents involved. That may not always be the case, but we need to look at that. I mean, how many more have to die before this agnostic culture of death is addressed in America? That, to me, is what has changed. The Republicans, we're the party of opportunity. See, we see endless opportunity for every American and want to make sure that everybody can get a bite at the apple. And, you know, but you even look at, like, the NFL. You know, they get end racism. That's a negative. Why don't you put love your neighbor on the back of helmets or in the end zone? You know, look, there's a lot of things to consider. Post-pandemic depression is definitely a part of it. We need to help the families so that they can help their family members that have a problem. If you look at these last two and shootings and some of the information that's coming forward, there were all the signs ahead of time and even warnings and even 911 calls saying that the guy was heading to the bank, that he wanted to kill people. All these things were out there and nothing was done. We need to address this at every level. We have a serious problem, but just going to gun control will never solve the problem of violence and depression and mental health that has developed over time. You know, Tom, there's a school in Adams County that at one time the ACLU came in and they went to court and made them take down "Thou shalt not kill" from in front of the school. So what kind of a message are we sending? And these are all things that I've said on the floor of the House, but I get a blank stare from the other side of the aisle, and all they want to do is talk about more gun control.
I agree with you 100% on the faith issue, fatherlessness. I think another factor, and I don't have the numbers to prove it, and maybe as a doctor you can comment on this, the psychotropic drugs, medications that may be needed in many cases, but it seems like there are an awful lot of these mass shooters that have been on or are on those types of medications. Have you seen that?
I haven't seen studies on it, but those are the types of things that I'm talking about we need to do. You know, go back to what I said, you know, what are the events in someone's life? That's an event in someone's life, those medications. That's all part of it. But what ultimately leads to the idea that this is okay? You know, and in some degree, too, and it's hard not to report on these things, obviously, but, you know, I think back in the 70s when people started running out on baseball fields to get attention for themselves, and TV said, we're not going to show you anymore. That put an end to it.
Yeah.
You really didn't see that happening anymore. That's a simple construct and far different from the gravity of what we see taking place. But it doesn't a lot of it seem to be copycat and, like, you know, I guess if I'm depressed and maybe suicidal, that this is what I want to do. This is my way of going out, get attention. I don't know. I just think we need to look into all of those types of things if we're going to make a change, and not simply, you know, scream and yell, we got to get rid of guns, because you never will.
Brad Wenstrup, U.S. Congressman from Ohio. Sir, always good talking to you. Thank you so much.
You bet, Tom. You have a great day.
You too, sir.
Thanks.
All right, 7:24. Back in a moment. Tom Roten Morning Show.